Well, hello. The piece that I'm going to share today is another piece by myself, and it's the only one that I've written so far this year during Advent. Anyone who reads my blog will have read it over the weekend, and I had written it the previous week, partly um, as an upshot of a period of sleeplessness. And quite often, my poems and reflections come out of that wakefulness that I sometimes have in the middle of the night when other things are playing on my mind. And I use poetry, other people's poetry, and working on my own wordplay um, to try to get me over to sleep. And sometimes it works better than others. Sometimes I'm more inspired than others. Um, and I'll leave you to judge whether this fits that category. The image that I shared when I posted it over the weekend was the image that I have behind me on screen. And I originally chose it because it was a somewhat dark and gloomy image of someone seeking inspiration, or at least that's what the picture conjured in my mind. It's actually an etching by Rembrandt of St. Jerome, who was presumably not seeking inspiration for the composing of poetry, but working his way through his translation of the scriptures. But I put it up today, not just because I shared it last weekend, but because actually this weekend I have just been to see the Rembrandt etchings that have been donated to the Ulster Museum in lieu of taxes. I mean, you have to wonder how big was the tax bill if 6 Rembrandt etchings pays it off. Um, uh, this etching, of course, isn't one of them. It's a much larger one that's part of the collection in the New York Metropolitan Museum. But the 6 etchings in the Ulster Museum are well worth going to see. They're well curated, and there's also a Renoir on display there as well. And as I say, the whole thing's well curated, and it's well managed from a point of view of being socially distant. But back to poetry rather than art. I had said in my blog that I doubted that this image would make it into my Advent art stream, and there might be some argument as to whether this poem fits easily within Advent poetry, because while it is inspired by the story of the Annunciation, it's more about absence than Advent in some way. Uh, I have said in my blog that it is unashamedly ripping off others. Christina Georgina Rossetti in the first verse, and St. John of the Cross towards the end. But if you're going to rip someone off, I mean, do steal from the best. But anyway, here is my poem for today, Non-Annunciation. Middle of the night, midwinter, as bleak as any I've known, with no snow on snow to cover the decay underfoot. Awake, awaiting the dawn, enfolded in the echoing dark, the cold silence pregnant with potential blessing. piercing. But the archangel is absent. No heavenly harbinger of unusual good news or peace in place of fear. So I am left in the darkness, uncomprehending, unhearing God's voice, unless his language is silence.